is wrong with the water pressure in this hotel? I demand a refund!
The marble floors of the Grand Meridian Hotel echoed with the sharp click of designer heels as Karen Whitmore stormed through the revolving doors, her homie's bag clutched like a weapon. Behind the mahogany front desk, night manager David Chen felt his stomach drop. He'd seen that look before, the predatory gleam of someone who'd found their prey. "The water pressure in my penthouse suite is unacceptable," she shrieked, her voice carrying across the opulent lobby. But as hotel security footage would later reveal, Karen's tantrum was about to collide with a truth so devastating it would shatter everything she thought she knew about power, privilege, and the price of cruelty. What happened next would transform both their lives forever and leave the entire hotel. The Grand Meridian Hotel had weathered many storms in its 40-year history: economic recessions, natural disasters, even a minor diplomatic incident involving a visiting ambassador and a misplaced peacock. But nothing had prepared night manager David Chen for the Category 5 hurricane that was Karen Whitmore. She materialized in the lobby at 11:47 p.m. like a vision from an angry god's nightmare. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a severe chignon that seemed to physically lift her eyebrows into a permanent expression of disdain. The black Chanel suit she wore probably cost more than David's monthly salary, and the way she moved, shoulders back, chin up, eyes scanning for weakness, reminded him of a shark circling wounded prey. "Excuse me." Her voice cut through the hushed atmosphere of the lobby like a fire alarm. The elderly couple reading by the fireplace jumped, their books tumbling to the Persian rug. A businessman at the bar nearly choked on his martini. "I need to speak to your manager. Now." David straightened his tie and approached the front desk where Karen had positioned herself like a general preparing for battle. At 28, he'd been the night manager for 3 years and he'd handled his share of difficult guests. But something about this woman's energy made his pulse quicken with warning signals. "Good evening. I'm David Chen, the night manager. How can I help you?" Karen's eyes narrowed as she sized him up. "You're the manager. You look like you should be parking cars." She leaned forward, her French manicured nails clicking against the marble counter. "I'm Karen Whitmore. I'm staying in the penthouse suite, and I am appalled by the accommodations." David pulled up her reservation on his computer. Karen Whitmore, penthouse suite, 3 nights, $2,400 per night. The comments section was already filled with special requests: hypoallergenic pillows, specific water temperature, organic toiletries, and a note that she was extremely particular about service standards. "I apologize for any inconvenience, Mrs. Whitmore. What specifically can I address for you?" "The water pressure." She slammed her hand on the counter, causing the brass bell to ring. "It's completely inadequate. I paid good money for this suite, and I expect 5-star service. The shower is pathetic, it's like being drizzled on by a dying garden hose." David nodded sympathetically. "I understand your frustration. Let me contact our maintenance team immediately." "I'm sure we can." "Oh, you're sure, are you?" Karen's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Do you know who I am? I'm the president of the West Side Homeowners Association. I have connections with the mayor, the city council, and the Better Business Bureau. I can make or break this hotel with a single phone call." The threat hung in the air like smoke. David felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his professional smile. "I absolutely want to resolve this for you, Mrs. Whitmore. Let me call our head of maintenance right now." "No, no, no." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "I don't want some minimum wage handyman touching my suite. I want a guarantee that this will be fixed immediately, or I want to speak to the general manager. Mr. Patterson is off duty until morning, but I have full authority to then call him at home." David blinked. It's nearly midnight. I'm sure we can handle this without disturbing. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. Do you understand what I pay in taxes to this city? Do you know how many charity events I've organized? I deserve better than this incompetent service." Her voice was rising with each word, and David noticed other guests beginning to stare. A young couple with a toddler was hurrying toward the elevators, the child's eyes wide with concern. The businessman at the bar had turned completely around on his stool, watching the scene unfold like a primetime drama. "Mrs. Whitmore," David said, lowering his voice in hopes she'd mirror his tone, "I completely understand your expectations. The Grand Meridian prides itself on exceptional service. Let me personally escort you back to your suite and assess the water pressure issue myself." Karen's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Oh, that's rich. You think I'm going to let some hotel clerk into my private quarters? I've heard about what happens in these situations. Sexual harassment lawsuits, theft accusations. I wasn't born yesterday. David felt heat rise in his cheeks. I assure you that's not, don't me. Karen's voice reached a new octave. I want this fixed, or I want compensation. A full refund, plus damages for the inconvenience and emotional distress you've caused me tonight. Emotional distress? David couldn't hide his incredulity. Yes. Do you think this is pleasant for me? Do you think I enjoy having to come down here at midnight to deal with your hotel's failures? I have a very important meeting tomorrow morning with the Planning Commission and I need my rest. But instead, I'm standing here arguing with someone who clearly doesn't understand customer service. David glanced at his watch. In 6 hours, the morning shift would arrive and his supervisor would want a full report on any incidents. He could already imagine the conversation. You let a guest scream in the lobby for how long? Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to personally ensure that our maintenance team addresses the water pressure issue first thing in the morning. In the meantime, I'd like to offer you a complimentary upgrade to our presidential suite, which I can guarantee has excellent water pressure. The presidential suite. Karen's eyes lit up briefly, then narrowed again. Why didn't you offer that immediately? Are you trying to upsell me? No. I'm offering it as a complimentary upgrade to resolve your concerns. And what about compensation for my suffering tonight? The embarrassment of having to make a scene in your lobby. The time I've wasted. David felt a muscle in his jaw twitch. I can authorize a 25% discount on your current suite. 25%. Karen's voice cracked like a whip. That's insulting. I want a full refund, or I'm calling the corporate office right now. She pulled out her phone, a latest model iPhone in a case that probably cost more than David's. Monthly car payment. I have the CEO's personal number. Gregory Hartwell and I go way back. We serve on the same hospital board. David's stomach dropped. Gregory Hartwell was indeed the CEO of Meridian Hotels International, and if this woman really had connections. Mrs. Whitmore, please. Let me see what else I can do. Finally. She lowered her phone but kept it ready. I want the presidential suite, a full refund on tonight's accommodation, and I want that maintenance person fired. Fired. David's voice came out higher than he intended. Obviously they are incompetent. The water pressure issue should have been caught during regular maintenance checks. Someone's not doing their job, and I won't stand for it. I haven't even assessed the problem yet. It could be as simple, are you questioning my judgment? Karen's eyes blazed. Are you suggesting I'm lying about the water pressure? The lobby had gone completely silent. Even the soft jazz music seemed to have stopped. David could feel every eye in the room focused on their confrontation. The elderly couple by the fireplace looked terrified. The businessman at the bar was openly filming with his phone. I'm not questioning anything, David said carefully. I just want to make sure we identify the right solution. The right solution is giving me what I deserve. Karen slammed her hand on the counter again, this time hard enough to make the computer monitor shake. I am a valued customer and I will not be treated like some peasant off the street. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask you to lower your voice. You're disturbing other guests. I'll lower my voice when I get the service I paid for. David took a deep breath. 3 years of hospitality training had taught him de-escalation techniques, but this situation was spiraling beyond normal parameters. He needed to regain control before security footage of this meltdown ended up on social media. I'm going to move you to the presidential suite right now, he said firmly. And I'm going to comp your entire stay. But I need you to work with me. Here. Karen's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in her armor of outrage. The entire stay. 3 nights in the presidential suite, no charge. Plus, I'll personally ensure that every aspect of your accommodation exceeds your expectations. And the maintenance person? David hesitated. I'll investigate the issue thoroughly. That's not good enough. I want them fired, or I'm still calling corporate. The standoff stretched between them like a taut wire. David could feel sweat beading on his forehead despite the lobby's perfect climate control. In the background, he heard the soft ding of elevator doors. Ramirez's hands trembled as he clutched them in conversations of guests trying to navigate around the drama. At 53, slowly, he'd worked maintenance at the Grand Meridian for 8 years, invisible to guests like Karen Whitmore who saw uniforms instead of people. But tonight, sitting in the fluorescent-lit employee break room at 6:30 a.m., he was about to become the most important person in the hotel. David Chen pushed through the break room door, his tie loosened and his usually perfect hair disheveled after the longest night of his career. He'd spent hours documenting the Karen Whitmore incident, crafting careful language that would satisfy corporate without admitting fault. The last thing he expected was to find Lewis waiting for him. "Lewis, what are you doing here? Your shift doesn't start until 7. The older man looked up with eyes that held decades of secrets. "Mr. Chen, I need to talk to you about the penthouse suite. About the water pressure problem." David poured himself coffee from the perpetually brewing pot, his body running on caffeine and adrenaline. "Don't worry about it. I handled the situation. Mrs. Whitmore is moving to the presidential suite, and I've comped her entire stay." "No," Lewis said quietly. "You don't understand. There's no water pressure problem in the penthouse." The coffee mug stopped halfway to David's lips. "What do you mean?" Lewis opened the manila folder with reverent care, revealing documents that looked like they'd been photocopied and refotocopied. "I've been maintaining that suite for 8 years. The water pressure is perfect. Always has been." "That's impossible. She wouldn't lie about something so easily verified." "She's not lying," Lewis said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's just not telling the whole truth." David set down his coffee and leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" Lewis pulled out the first document, a maintenance log with dates and signatures. 3 months ago, Mrs. Whitmore called the front desk to complain about the water pressure. I was sent up to check. "Okay. But when I got there, she wouldn't let me in. Said she was in a meeting. So I tested the water pressure from the mechanical room, all normal. I documented it." He pointed to an entry dated 3 months prior. "Same thing happened 6 weeks ago. And again last month." David's stomach began to churn. "Are you saying she's been making false complaints?" "I'm saying she's been making complaints she won't let us verify." Lewis pulled out another document. This one bearing the hotel's official letterhead. "But that's not the real problem." The document was an incident report, signed by the previous night manager, Rebecca Walsh. David had replaced Rebecca when she was promoted to regional management. But he'd never seen this particular report. 8 months ago, Lewis continued, Mrs. Whitmore made the same complaint. "Rebecca sent me up to check. But this time, Mrs. Whitmore let me in." David scanned the report, his eyes widening as he read Rebecca's careful documentation. She what?" "She propositioned me," Lewis said simply. "Right there in the suite. Said if I could take care of her personal needs, she'd make sure I got a promotion. Better pay. Benefits for my family." The words hit David like a physical blow. "And you reported this?" "I told her no, very politely. She got angry. Started yelling about how I was unprofessional, how I'd insulted her. Then she called down to complain about the water pressure." David's hands shook as he read Rebecca's report. The language was clinical, professional, but the implications were devastating. Why didn't Rebecca do anything about this? "She tried." Lewis pulled out another document, a letter from the hotel's corporate legal department. "She reported it up the chain. But Mrs. Whitmore got there first." The letter was dated 1 week after the incident. It was from Gregory Hartwell's office, instructing all Meridian hotels to provide exceptional service to Mrs. Whitmore, who was described as a valued customer with significant community connections. "She really does know the CEO," David whispered. "She knows everyone," Lewis said bitterly. "The mayor, the city council, the police chief." Rebecca was told to handle the situation discreetly and avoid any public relations complications. David felt the room spinning around him. "So Rebecca buried it." "Rebecca tried to protect me. She made sure I was never assigned to the penthouse suite again. Different maintenance workers, different shifts. But Mrs. Whitmore kept coming back." "Why?" Lewis's laugh was hollow. "Because she can. Because she knows that as long as she has her connections, she's untouchable. And because she likes the power." David stared at the documents spread across the break room table. The water pressure complaints are her way of getting maintenance workers sent to her room. Always male workers. Always alone. Lewis pulled out a final document, a list of names with dates. Tommy Reeves quit 6 months ago. Said he needed to get away from this place. Marcus Williams transferred to the downtown location. Asked specifically never to work the penthouse floor again. Jesus Christ. I keep records, Mr. Chen. Every complaint, every incident, every time she calls down with some excuse to get a man sent to her room. Because someday, someone's going to need proof." David's phone buzzed. A text from the morning desk manager. Karen Whitmore at front desk. Wants to speak to you immediately. She's downstairs, David said, showing Lewis the text. Lewis's face went pale. She knows. What do you mean? She saw me last night. During her tantrum. I was mopping near the back entrance and she looked right at me. She knows I heard everything. David's mind raced. The presidential suite. I moved her to the presidential suite. Then she's going to complain about something else. The temperature. The lighting, the view. Anything to get another maintenance worker sent up. Not if I can help it. David stood up, his jaw set with determination. Lewis, I want you to take these documents to Rebecca Walsh. Call her at home if you have to. Tell her we need corporate involved immediately. Mr. Chen, you don't understand. This woman has destroyed careers. Rebecca was promoted to get her out of the way, but she was told never to mention the incident again. If I go to corporate. If you don't go to corporate, how many more workers is she going to harass? Lewis stared at the documents, then at David. She'll come after you too. The moment she realizes you know the truth. Let her try. David's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from the front desk. Mr. Chen. Mrs. Whitmore is here, and she's very upset. She says there's something wrong with the presidential suite now. What kind of problem? She says the bathroom door won't lock properly. She wants maintenance to come up immediately. David and Lewis exchanged glances. Tell her I'll be right down. Sir, she specifically asked for a maintenance worker. She says she doesn't want to deal with incompetent management anymore. Tell her I'm coming down, David repeated firmly. And call hotel security. Tell them to be ready. He hung up and turned to Lewis. I want you to stay here. Don't leave this room until I come back. Mr. Chen, she's dangerous. She's not just some entitled customer, she's a predator. Oh no. David straightened his tie and smoothed his hair. But I'm not Rebecca Walsh. And I'm not going to let her destroy anyone else. As David walked toward the break room door, Lewis called out, Mr. Chen. There's something else you should know. David turned back. The bathroom door in the presidential suite. I installed that lock myself 2 weeks ago. It's brand new, top of the line. There's nothing wrong with it. David nodded grimly. I figured as much. The elevator ride to the lobby felt like a descent into hell. David's mind churned with the implications of what Lewis had revealed. How many other hotels had dealt with Karen Whitmore? How many other workers had been harassed, intimidated, or driven from their jobs? The elevator doors opened to reveal chaos. Karen Whitmore stood in the center of the lobby like a hurricane made flesh, her voice carrying across the marble expanse as she berated the morning desk manager. I specifically told your night manager that I expected perfect accommodations. And what do I find? A bathroom door that won't lock. Do you understand the security implications? The privacy concerns. The morning desk manager, a young woman named Sarah, looked close to tears. I can send maintenance up right away. Yes, you can. And make sure it's someone competent this time. I don't want some elderly janitor who doesn't know the difference between a door and a window. David felt his blood turn to ice. She'd seen Lewis. She knew exactly who she was targeting. Mrs. Whitmore, David called out as he approached. I understand there's an issue with the presidential suite. Karen whirled around, her eyes blazing with renewed fury. Oh, it's you. I thought you'd learned your lesson about proper service last night. I'd like to personally inspect the issue and ensure it's resolved to your satisfaction. No. Karen's voice was flat, final. I want a maintenance worker. A young one who knows what he's doing. And I want him up there in the next 10 minutes, or I'm calling corporate. I'm perfectly qualified to. Are you deaf? Karen's voice rose to a shriek. I said I want maintenance. Not some pencil-pushing manager who's never held a screwdriver in his life. The lobby fell silent. Guests froze in their tracks, staring at the spectacle. The businessman from the night before was back at the bar, his phone out again, recording every word. David felt something snap inside him. All the years of swallowing his pride, of appeasing unreasonable customers, of protecting. Conference Room B had witnessed thousands of corporate meetings, staff reviews, and guest relations discussions. But it had never contained the kind of electric tension that crackled between David Chen and Karen Whitmore as they sat across from each other at the polished mahogany table. Karen had positioned herself strategically, her back to the window with its view of the city skyline, forcing David to face the morning sun streaming through the glass. It was a power play she'd perfected over years of hostile negotiations and intimidation tactics. But David wasn't squinting or shifting uncomfortably. He sat perfectly still, his hands folded, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "I want to record this conversation," Karen announced, pulling out her phone. "For my protection." "By all means," David replied. "I was going to suggest the same thing." Karen's finger hovered over the record button. Something in his tone made her hesitate. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Fear. Groveling. The usual kowtowing I get from hotel management when I threaten to call corporate." David leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think we both know this conversation isn't really about water pressure or door locks." "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." David opened the folder he'd brought with him, Lewis's documents, photocopied and organized. "You've made 17 complaints about the penthouse suite in the past 8 months. 17 separate incidents requiring maintenance visits." Karen's eyes flicked to the folder, then back to his face. "That's because your maintenance standards are abysmal." "Interesting thing about those complaints," David continued, his voice conversational. "They are all about different issues. Water pressure, door locks, temperature control, electrical outlets, plumbing fixtures. But they all have one thing in common. Which is, they all require a maintenance worker to enter your suite. Alone." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Karen's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the table surface, her wedding ring clicking with each tap. "Are you accusing me of something?" she asked finally. "I'm presenting facts. Would you like to hear more?" "I think I'd like to call my lawyer now." "You're free to do that. But I think you should know that your lawyer might want to review these documents first." David slid a sheet across the table. "This is a statement from Luis Ramirez, our maintenance supervisor. He's documented every interaction he's had with you over the past 8 months." Karen glanced at the paper, her face going pale. "That man is clearly disturbed. Making up stories, trying to get attention. These are his contemporaneous notes, Mrs. Whitmore. Written immediately after each incident. Including the one 8 months ago when you propositioned him." "That's a lie." "Is it?" "Because we also have security footage from the hallway cameras. Nothing from inside your suite, of course, we respect guest privacy. But the timestamps show how long Lewis was in your room, and they correspond exactly with his written reports." Karen's hand moved to her throat, a gesture so unconscious it revealed more than any words could. "Security footage can be manipulated." "It can. But it wasn't. And neither were the statements from Tommy Reeves and Marcus Williams." David watched the color drain from Karen's face. "You remember them, don't you? Tommy quit 6 months ago. Marcus requested a transfer. Both mentioned your name specifically in their exit interviews. I don't have to listen to this." "You're right. You don't." David closed the folder. "You can walk out of here right now. Go back to your suite, pack your things, and leave. We'll comp your entire stay, just like I promised last night." Karen's eyes narrowed. "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for never setting foot in any Meridian hotel again. Ever. You can't ban me from, actually, I can. Sexual harassment of staff is grounds for immediate removal from the premises and permanent prohibition from all Meridian properties. It's in the fine print of our guest services agreement." Karen laughed, but it sounded forced. "Sexual harassment. That's rich. I'm a respected member of this community. I serve on 3 different boards. I have lunch with the mayor's wife every Tuesday." "I'm sure you do. But none of that changes what you've done to my employees." "What I've allegedly done." "What you've done," David corrected firmly. "Lewis isn't the only one who's been keeping records, Mrs. Whitmore. We've had our eye on you for months." It was a bluff, but Karen's reaction told him it had hit home. Her perfectly controlled facade cracked just enough to reveal the panic underneath. "I want to speak to your general manager. He's been briefed on the situation. He's the one who authorized me to make this offer. Then I want to speak to corporate. Gregory Hartwell will be very interested to hear how his hotels treat valued customers." David smiled, and Karen recognized the expression from the night before, the look of someone who held all the cards. "Funny you should mention Mr. Hartwell," David said. He's actually the one who requested a full investigation into your complaints. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly that even he almost believed it. But Karen's face told him everything he needed to know about her relationship with the CEO. That's not possible. Isn't it? You've been making complaints at Meridian hotels in 3 different cities, Mrs. Whitmore. Los Angeles, San Francisco, and now here in Sacramento. Always the same pattern: maintenance requests, male workers, inappropriate behavior. Karen's phone buzzed with an incoming text. She glanced at it, and David saw her face go white. Problem? He asked. Oh. I need to make a call. Of course. Take your time. Karen stood abruptly and walked to the window, her phone pressed to her ear. David couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see her reflection in the glass, the way her free hand shook, the way her shoulders tensed with each word. When she returned to the table, she looked like a different person. The imperious confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Who did you call? David asked. My husband. And he wants to know why a private investigator has been asking questions about my travel schedule. David felt his pulse quicken. Private investigator. Someone hired a PI to look into my hotel stays. My complaints. She swallowed hard. My interactions with staff. Any idea who might have done that? Karen's laugh was bitter. Take your pick. I have a lot of enemies in this town. Or maybe you have a lot of victims. The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Karen stared at him, her carefully constructed armor finally cracking completely. What do you want? She asked quietly. I want you to leave. Quietly. Without making any more false complaints or threatening my staff. And if I don't? David pulled out his own phone and showed her the screen. Then I make a call to the Sacramento Police Department. Detective Maria Santos is very interested in speaking with you about a pattern of sexual harassment complaints that have been filed against you. Karen's eyes widened. That's impossible. I've never been charged with anything. Not yet. But Detective Santos specializes in workplace harassment cases. She's very good at connecting dots. You're bluffing. Am I? David stood up and walked to the door. Detective Santos. You can come in now. The door opened and a woman in her 40s entered, her badge clearly visible on her belt. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who dealt with every type of predator the city had to offer. Mrs. Whitmore. Detective Santos extended her hand. I'm Detective Maria Santos, Sacramento PD. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your recent hotel stays. Karen remained seated, her face frozen in shock. Oh. I don't have to talk to you without my lawyer present. That's absolutely you're right. But I should mention that we've already spoken with several former hotel employees who've made allegations against you. Tommy Reeves, Marcus Williams, and 3 others from hotels in Los Angeles and San Francisco. This is harassment, Karen whispered. No, Mrs. Whitmore. This is an investigation. What you've been doing to hotel workers, that's harassment. Detective Santos took a seat at the table, her movements deliberate and professional. I understand you've been making complaints about maintenance issues. Issues that seem to require one-on-one interactions with male employees. I have a right to proper service. You do. But you don't have a right to proposition employees. Threaten their jobs or create a hostile work environment. Karen looked between David and Detective Santos, her mind clearly racing. I want to call my lawyer. Of course. But first, I need to ask you about Luis Ramirez. He's filed a formal complaint alleging that you solicited sexual favors in exchange for job benefits. That's a lie. Is it? Because we have his written report, corroborated by hotel security footage and witness statements from other employees who've observed your behavior. Karen's phone buzzed again. This time she ignored it. Mrs. Whitmore, Detective Santos continued, I'm going to be straight with you. We have enough evidence to charge you with sexual harassment, solicitation, and abuse of power. The only question is whether you want to resolve this quietly or publicly. What are you talking about? David leaned forward. The detective is offering you the same choice I offered you 15 minutes ago. Walk away and this ends here. Continue this behavior and it becomes a criminal matter. Karen stared at the table, her hands trembling. You can The Sacramento Police Department's interrogation room had seen its share of desperate people, but Detective Maria Santos had rarely witnessed a collapse as complete as Karen Whitmore's. The woman who had terrorized hotel workers across 3 cities now sat hunched over the metal table, her designer suit wrinkled and her perfectly styled hair showing the first signs of disorder. "Mrs. Whitmore," Detective Santos said, settling into the chair across from her, "I want to make sure you understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney." "I know my rights," Karen interrupted, her voice hoarse from crying. "I want to call my lawyer." "Of course. But before you do, I think you should know what we are dealing with here." Detective Santos opened a thick file folder, revealing photographs, witness statements, and hotel records spanning 18 months. "This isn't just about your behavior at the Grand Meridian. We've been investigating complaints from 7 different hotels in 3 cities. 16 different employees have come forward." Karen's face went white. 16. That we know of. The number keeps growing as word spreads that someone's finally taking these complaints seriously. I didn't hurt anyone. Didn't you?" Detective Santos pulled out a photograph of a young man in a hotel uniform. "This is Miguel Castillo. He was 22 when you propositioned him at the Meridian Los Angeles. He quit the hotel industry entirely after your encounter. He's now working construction, barely making ends meet." She flipped to another photo. James Morrison, night maintenance at the San Francisco location. He filed a complaint with his supervisor after you cornered him in a supply closet. The complaint was buried and he was transferred to the day shift at reduced hours. "I never cornered anyone. We have security footage, Mrs. Whitmore. And not just from hotel cameras." Detective Santos slid a tablet across the table, showing grainy surveillance footage from a parking garage. "This is from the Meridian San Francisco's employee parking area. You followed Mr. Morrison to his car after his shift." Karen stared at the screen, watching herself approach a young man who was clearly trying to get away. I wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding." At 2 a.m. in a deserted parking garage. Karen's phone, which had been buzzing intermittently since they'd arrived at the station, rang again. This time Detective Santos answered it. "This is Detective Santos." "Yes, this is regarding Mrs. Whitmore." "I understand it." "Yes, she's here voluntarily, but that may change." She hung up and looked at Karen with something that might have been pity. That was City Attorney Jennifer Walsh. "She's calling an emergency session of the City Council to discuss your removal from the Homeowners Association board." "They can't do that without due process." "Actually, they can. Especially when the FBI gets involved." Karen's head snapped up. "FBI?" Detective Santos nodded grimly. "Your pattern of behavior suggests a federal case. Crossing state lines to commit crimes, using your position of authority to intimidate victims, these are federal offenses. I want my lawyer. Now." "Of course. But Mrs. Whitmore, before you make that call, I want you to understand something. Right now, you have the opportunity to cooperate. To help us understand the scope of what's been happening. If you wait for lawyers and federal prosecutors to get involved." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that cooperation might be the difference between rehabilitation and prison." Karen stared at the photo spread across the table, her hands shaking. "I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" I felt powerful. Important. These men looked at me like I was just another entitled customer, but when I made them come to my room, when I had them alone, I was in control." Detective Santos leaned forward. "And when they rejected you?" "I got angry. I felt humiliated. So I complained about their work, got them in trouble. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. But it did hurt people. Careers were destroyed. Lives were ruined." Karen's phone rang again. This time she looked at the caller ID and went pale. "It's my daughter. You should take that." Karen answered with trembling fingers. "Hello, sweetheart." "What? No, that's not. Where did you hear that?" Detective Santos could hear a young woman's voice on the other end, urgent and distressed. "Someone posted a video online," Karen said, her voice breaking. "A video of me screaming at that hotel manager. It's everywhere, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. They are calling me the Hotel Karen." Detective Santos pulled out her own phone and quickly searched social media. The video from the hotel lobby had indeed gone viral. #Hotel Karen was trending, with thousands of comments calling for justice, sharing similar stories, and demanding accountability. Ashley, listen to me, Karen continued desperately. This is all a misunderstanding. I'm going to fix this. The call ended abruptly. Karen stared at her phone, then looked up at Detective Santos with tears streaming down her face. She hung up on me. My own daughter hung up on me. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Were there others? Others? Other situations where you used your position or connections to intimidate people? Not just hotel workers. Karen was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. The landscaping company. What about them? They were working on the community garden project. The crew chief was this young guy, maybe 25. Very good looking. I kept finding reasons to inspect their work, to get him alone. And he wasn't interested. So I filed a complaint with the city, said they were behind schedule and over budget. They lost the contract. Detective Santos made notes. Anyone else? The city planning office. There was an aide, worked for the mayor. I made up a story about him being inappropriate during a meeting. He was reassigned. How many people, Mrs. Whitmore? Karen closed her eyes. I don't know. Maybe a dozen. Maybe more. The interrogation room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of the police station. Detective Santos studied the broken woman across from her, trying to reconcile this trembling figure with the predator who had terrorized so many innocent people. There's something else you need to know, Detective Santos said finally. David Chen, the hotel manager who confronted you. He's been in contact with victims from all 3 cities. They are organizing a class action lawsuit. Civil rights violations, intentional infliction of emotional distress, interference with employment. Your victims are fighting back. Karen's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and gasped. What is it? My husband. He's filing for divorce. He says he can't be married to someone who. She couldn't finish the sentence. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you ready to cooperate fully? To provide names, dates, and details about everyone you've harassed or intimidated? Karen nodded slowly, the fight finally gone out of her. What happens to me? That depends on a lot of factors. Your level of cooperation, the extent of the damage, whether the victims are willing to accept a plea agreement. And if they're not, then you're looking at federal charges, civil lawsuits, and probably prison time. Karen's phone rang again. This time it was her lawyer, demanding to know why his client was talking to police without representation. But as Detective Santos watched Karen Whitmore, the woman who had once wielded her connections like weapons, she realized that all the lawyers in the world couldn't save someone from the consequences of their own actions. 3 hours later, back at the Grand Meridian Hotel, David Chen was finishing his shift report when Luis Ramirez knocked on his office door. Mr. Chen. I just wanted to thank you. For what? For believing me. For taking action. I've worked in hotels for 20 years and I've never seen management stand up for employees like that. David looked up from his computer. Luis, can I ask you something? Why didn't you quit like the others? Luis was quiet for a moment. Because I have 3 kids and a mortgage. Because jobs like this aren't easy to find when you're over 50. But mostly because I knew that if I didn't stop her, she'd just keep doing it to other people. Well, she's stopped now. Is she? Really? David pulled up the news on his computer. Federal investigation launched into harassment allegations against prominent Sacramento businesswoman. City Council calls emergency session. Mayor's office distances itself from former board member. And the hotel corporate called an hour ago. We are implementing new protocols for guest complaints, mandatory training for all staff, and a direct hotline for reporting harassment. What you did is going to protect hotel workers across the entire chain. Luis smiled, and David realized. It was the first time he'd seen the man look truly happy. Mr. Chen. There's something I didn't tell you earlier. What's that? Mrs. Whitmore isn't the first guest like this we've dealt with. She's just the first one who got caught. David felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean? I mean, there are others out there. Other people who think their money and connections make them untouchable. Other predators hiding behind expensive clothes and prestigious addresses. But now they know that's not true anymore. Do they? Luis pulled out his phone and showed David a news article. Look at this. The headline read, Hotel Karen's downfall inspires other victims to come forward. The article detailed d. 6 months later, David Chen stood at the podium of the Congressional Subcommittee on Workplace Rights, looking out at a packed hearing room filled with cameras, reporters, and faces he'd come to know well over the past half year. The arc lights were hot on his face, but nothing could match the intensity of what he was about to reveal. Mr. Chen, Congresswoman Patricia Williams said, her voice carrying across the hushed chamber, "You've testified that the Karen Whitmore case was just the tip of the iceberg. Can you elaborate on what your investigation uncovered?" David adjusted the microphone and looked down at the thick folder before him. 6 months of investigations, testimonies, and revelations that had shaken the foundations of how America treated its service workers. Congresswoman, what we discovered was a network. A systematic culture of abuse that protected wealthy predators while silencing their victims through intimidation, legal threats, and institutional corruption. Behind him, a massive screen displayed a web of connections, names, corporations, political figures, all linked by money, influence, and complicity. At the center was Karen Whitmore, but radiating outward were dozens of other cases, other predators, other victims who had finally found their voices. The Whitmore Network, as we've come to call it, involved not just individual harassers but the institutions that enabled them. Hotel chains that buried complaints. Police departments that refused to investigate. City councils that looked the other way. Corporate boards that prioritized reputation management over worker safety. In the gallery, Luis Ramirez sat with 17 other hotel workers who had testified over the past 3 days. Their faces showed the toll of months of depositions, media attention, and death threats from supporters of the accused. But they also showed something else, a determination that had transformed them from silent victims into powerful advocates for change. Mr. Chen, Congressman Robert Hayes interrupted, his tone skeptical. "These are very serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support claims of such widespread corruption?" David nodded to his attorney, who activated the screen behind him. "We have documented evidence of a conspiracy involving 43 businesses, 12 public officials, and numerous law enforcement personnel across 3 states. The screen showed bank records, email communications, and phone logs. Mrs. Whitmore's husband, Richard Whitmore, was a managing partner at Whitmore and Associates, a lobbying firm that represented hospitality industry clients. When harassment complaints were filed against his wife, the firm would pressure hotels to transfer or terminate the accusers. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, Congressman. It's a documented fact." David's voice carried the confidence of someone who had spent 6 months building an unshakable case. "We have recordings of Richard Whitmore threatening hotel employees, promising to destroy their careers if they didn't withdraw their complaints." The hearing room erupted in whispers. In the press gallery, reporters frantically typed updates, while camera operators zoomed in on David's face. Furthermore, David continued, "We've uncovered evidence that this network extended into local government. Mayor Patricia Caldwell received substantial campaign contributions from Whitmore and Associates in exchange for ensuring that harassment complaints against their clients were either dismissed or never investigated." On the screen, campaign finance records showed a clear pattern: donations followed by dropped investigations, transferred employees, and buried reports. Congresswoman Williams leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, what finally broke this conspiracy of silence?" David smiled grimly. A 47-second video of a woman screaming at a hotel clerk over water pressure. Sometimes the most ordinary moments reveal the most extraordinary truths. In the gallery, Karen Whitmore's former victims watched as David recounted the night that had changed everything. Tommy Reeves, who had quit the hotel industry entirely, was now studying law. Marcus Williams had started a non-profit organization for hospitality workers' rights. Miguel Castillo had testified the day before about the panic attacks and depression that had followed his encounter with Karen, bringing several congressmen to tears. "The viral video did more than expose one person's behavior," David explained. "It gave permission to hundreds of other victims to speak out." Within a week of Karen Whitmore's arrest, we had reports from 37 different businesses. Within a month, it was over 200. And these weren't just hotel workers. Restaurant servers, retail employees, domestic workers, landscapers, contractors, anyone who provided services to wealthy clients. The pattern was always the same: sexual harassment followed by retaliation if the advance was rejected. Complaints were buried, accusers were fired or transferred, and the predators continued their behavior with impunity. Detective Maria Santos, now working with a federal task force, stood to address the committee. The investigation revealed that this network had been operating for over a decade. "We've identified at least 400 victims across 3 states. With damages in the tens of millions when you account for lost wages, career destruction, and psychological trauma." "What happened to Mrs. Whitmore?" Congressman Hayes asked. Karen Whitmore pled guilty to federal charges of civil rights violations, conspiracy, and racketeering. She was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Her husband received 12 years for his role in the conspiracy. Mayor Caldwell resigned and is awaiting trial. David looked out at the packed hearing room, seeing faces that had become familiar over months of testimony. Hotel workers who had found their voices. Restaurant servers who had filed lawsuits. Retail employees who had organized unions. A movement that had started with one night manager's decision to stand up to a bully had grown into a national reckoning. But the real victory, David continued, isn't in the prison sentences or the financial settlements. It's in the laws that have been passed, the training programs that have been implemented, and the culture change that's happening across the service industry. The screen displayed statistics that told the story of transformation. Harassment complaints up 400% as victims felt safe to report. Prosecution rates up 800% as law enforcement took complaints seriously. New federal legislation protecting service workers from retaliation, mandatory training programs in all 50 states. Mr. Chen, Congresswoman Williams said, "You've become something of a symbol for this movement. How has your life changed?" David paused, thinking of the 6 months that had transformed him from a night manager trying to keep peace in a hotel lobby to a national advocate for workers' rights. 6 months ago, I thought my job was to keep customers happy, no matter what? I thought that complaining guests were just part of the business and that my role was to absorb their anger and move on. I learned that some customers aren't just difficult, they are dangerous. And that sometimes the most important thing you can do is say no. In the audience, Luis Ramirez nodded approvingly. He had been promoted to head of maintenance at the Grand Meridian, and the hotel had become a model for worker protection policies across the industry. The night Karen Whitmore stormed into our lobby, I made a choice. I could have given her what she wanted, comped her stay, and sent her on her way. Instead, I chose to listen to my employee, investigate his claims, and stand up for what was right. That choice didn't just change one night, it changed everything. Congresswoman Williams smiled. And what would you say to other workers who might be facing similar situations? David looked directly into the cameras, knowing his words would reach millions of service workers across the country. I would say that you don't have to accept abuse as part of your job. You don't have to smile while customers scream at you, proposition you, or threaten your livelihood. You have rights, you have dignity, and you have people who will stand with you when you find the courage to speak out. The hearing room erupted in applause. In the gallery, dozens of former victims stood and cheered, their faces showing not just vindication but hope. The service industry employs over 60 million Americans, David continued as the applause died down. For too long, we've been told that the customer is always right, even when they're wrong, abusive, or criminal. That ends now. As the hearing concluded and reporters rushed to file their stories, David gathered his papers and prepared to leave. In 6 months, he had testified before Congress, appeared on national television, and spoken at conferences across the country. But tomorrow, he would return to Sacramento and the job he loved, managing the night shift at a hotel where employees knew they were protected and customers understood that respect was a two-way street. Luis Ramirez approached him as he left the witness table. "Mr. Chen, I wanted you to know there's going to be a documentary about all this. They want to call it The Night That Changed Everything." David smiled. "And what do you think about that?" "I think it's about time the world knew that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who decides to do what's right instead of what's easy." As they walked out of the Capitol building together, David's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca Walsh, who was now the regional director of a new worker advocacy program. "Watch the hearing. Thank you for finishing what I couldn't start. The revolution is complete." But David knew it wasn't complete, it was just beginning.